We'll move on to public participation, and beginning with the public forum, could I invite Ross Harlan to come forward?
Thanks, mate. Sorry about this. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Your Worship. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to hear. My address is very short. It's just to do with the levy that we've been imposed for the rebuild of the cathedral. And whilst it's only small at $7.50, it is another levy on our rates, which are causing concern to all us ratepayers that they're just continually going up. My particular brief is here is that the council, by approving that, have made a bit of a decision to represent one church, and if you can do that, why is the levy not maybe being added to the rebuild of the basilica? My background all the way through has been in insurance, and what particularly gets me here is that I accept that the cathedral is in the historic trust and therefore it has to be protected. But I would have thought it was mandatory for anyone who's got a historic building that they should be fully insured. Then we wouldn't have this problem, because that's what insurance is for. Now, we've already, as ratepayers, suffered with the fact that under the previous Mr. Marriott, the council changed insurance, obviously worked on the principle we're not going to lose everything at one time, not realising an earthquake would come. And we were massively underinsured across the whole of the council, and we're paying for that already. The likes of Mr. Anderton and them that continually took this procedure of rebuilding the cathedral to court, if they put that money into paying a full insurance replacement on the cathedral, it wouldn't be falling on us to rebuild. And I did a small survey. I've got a daughter and another friend who are both teachers at high school, different ones, and I got them raised about the issue. Most people didn't even realise that we'd been levied for the rebuild of the church. And whilst I appreciate Glenn told me that we had the chance to argue on the 10-year plan, in all reality, how many people read it and how many people move along here to actually say that so these friends of ours copied the back of rates, got their children taken home and asked the parents, firstly, were they aware that we were being levied for the church? 85%, and it was just over 100 that I did in the survey, didn't have a clue. And of those, over 90% objected to the fact that we should be contributing to the church and stand on its own feet. And really, that's my concern, that we've picked a church. The fact that I don't support it, I'm going to read it, which I suppose is quite rude. And we're supporting the rebuild of our Catholic church, but this isn't a Catholic versus anyone else. I just think that a dangerous precedent has been established by picking one particular building because they're underinsured and making us all pay for it. And whilst the levy is only to be for supposedly 10 years, I guarantee at the end of the 10 years our rates won't reduce, it'll be absorbed into the current thing. So I just believe that as the council, we're here to represent all of us, and I don't believe we were all duly consulted. And if the majority of the ratepayers suggest they have to pay, obviously so am I. But I don't believe that that's the case. And on that small survey I've done, I think most people are quite ignorant about the fact it's piddly, it's small, but it's still another levy that we're being levied for the fact that someone could have done something about it if they'd fully insured the cathedral. And so those are my concerns.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, the public participation forum is a 5-minute opportunity for people to come along and have their say, and really appreciate you having done so. I'd like to offer to follow up with providing you with some information about the process that we went through. It's not going to change anything, and I understand that your position is the way it is. I like the fact that we're a council where people can come along and have their say, and we really appreciate the fact that you've done so today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Bell.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Councillors. Cool. Nice to see you all again. Thanks for having me. Just want to chat about just a couple of things today. So first of all, so the Big Band Festival and Little Andromeda. I'd planned for a while to come and brief everyone on the Big Band Festival, which we are now in the 12th year of. So we have big bands come from around the South Island every year, sometimes from the North Island, basically activating the city over Labour weekend. Something like 60-something individual performances happening around the city. So you go to New Regent Street, the Art Gallery, Turanga this year, Little High. You'll find big bands everywhere. So about 15 to 20 big bands from Christchurch and the South Island are going to be performing around the city, and I'd really just really want to encourage everyone to get out and check it out. There is a website here, so you can quite easily see if I can. Oh, yep. Anyway, oh yeah, here we are. I'll work out how to use this. So you can go around and see things in the streets. There are dances in the evenings. There are gala concerts. We've got Steve Gadd, who is pretty much the #1 drummer in the world, is coming to Christchurch to perform this Labour weekend. And the other thing I would plead with you is please don't go on holiday on Labour weekend. Stick around the town because as well as the Big Band Festival, there's Festa, which is going to be everywhere, and Spanish and Latino Week. It's going to be just a really, really exciting time to be in Christchurch.
Oh.
So so make sure you you check it out. Now, just very smoothly segueing, thank you, very smoothly segueing in, we were about 2.5 months ago trying to, I guess, solve the age-old Christchurch problem of what are we going to do for a venue for our gala concert. And we basically started looking at this idea of, well, what if we put up a festival tent to use as a hub, and I was like, well, I think I know a few other dozen people that would be keen to get involved in this pop-up venue. So I made some phone calls, and before, within about a month, we had about 75 bookings for this theoretical venue. I guess continue to look down this track, and want to actually thank the council, the Enliven Places Project Fund, who have put forward 15,000 into this project, and it looks like we're going to be open 1 week today. So, so please come down and check that out. Touch wood. So this is going to be on the site of the Future Performing Arts Precinct, so the corner of Colombo Street and Gloucester Street. So there'll be food trucks, a bar, and basically we're actually up to 92 performances now over 45 days, and they're still coming in. So we've got music, magic, comedy, theatre, circus, sketch shows. This person's coming from Melbourne. She wasn't going to come to Christchurch, but she's coming to perform in Christchurch now. You can watch people paint. We've got dance events. Actually, I'm not sure if it's live yet. I think it's going live today. Parkour and BMX extravaganza, hip hop show. So lots of things happening over the 6 weeks that will be open. So I, again, really hope to see, also 5 festivals are going to use it either as a hub or as one of their venues. So Festa, Big Band Festival, Spanish Latino Week, Festival of the Undead, and Comedy Carnival. We're going to use this as a venue. We're going to have at this stage, about 450 performers taking part in it. And it's just going to be just a big, a fun time, I suppose. So, again, please try and make it down. If you can make it down next Thursday, it will just have gone up, so we'll probably still be working out the systems. Go easy on us. But I'd love to see you at the opening, 6 p.m. next Thursday, the 4th of October. Otherwise, come any time after that, and you can have a look at the website and see what's on littleandromeda.co.nz. So that's what I have to say today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks so much.
Spot on time too. Thank you.
Amazing. Cheers.
Right. Now we move on to deputations by appointment, and could we start with item 28, the Historic Places Canterbury. Mark Gerard, welcome.
My apologies, councillors. The internet was down on power cut last night, but this deputation is a compliment, so I don't think you need to be too worried about the detail. I just thank you, Mayor and councillors, for granting Historic Places Canterbury the request to make this deputation. This deputation made reference to the draft heritage strategy item 28 on today's council meeting agenda. HPC is aware that it is proposed that the draft strategy be put out for consultation in a panel hearing, and this deputation confines itself to the process of the engagement used. HPC commends the councillors for adopting a process of engagement where the community and individuals drove the formulation of the draft heritage strategy. HPC also commends the Christchurch heritage team who, with professionalism and vigour, almost bordering on enthusiasm, engage the community. It is the Chair's opinion that there cannot be many individuals or community groups who missed out on the Council Heritage Team's determined engagement. Firstly, Historic Places Canterbury wishes to formally thank you to the councillors who approved the engagement that effectively allowed the Heritage Team to go out to the community and ask what they wanted in their heritage strategy. As HBC Chair, I would like to record my appreciation for the leadership shown by the councillors who participated in the engagement. As Chair, I heard the Mayor, Councillors Clarewood and Galloway participated in workshops, and Councillors Livingston and Johansson attended the community report back. For those councillors who attended the engagement events, and I have admitted to mention, please accept my apologies. My excuse that the engagement was so extensive it was difficult to keep up of who attended where, so thank you for your leadership. Secondly, Historic Places Canterbury requests the councillors pass on to the Heritage Team our appreciation of the design of the engagement process and its execution that led up to this draft heritage strategy. Their efforts, we should note, were recognised with a commendation at this year's Canterbury Heritage Awards. And I should note, as the Mayor will testify, they are an outstanding success and a sellout. As Chair, there are two snapshots that I'd like to share with that sort of sum up the Heritage Team's approach. The Heritage Team Social Commentary Development and Housing Committee report on what I would call the research phase, where they reported back on what they'd found. Had some really interesting things. I consider the report in its context to be a very good one, and as you already well be aware, I lobbied quite hard at the coffee break for its findings to be reported back to the community. And the Heritage Team was so immersed in the process of that they may not have been aware of the interest in the contents reports, which is a compliment to the CEO that they were so locked in where they were going and what they were doing, etc., in the process where they were going, that an idea that we change tack slightly and go back to the community, but the upshot was, later that day, I got a phone call, quite late in the day, seeking my informal feedback on an outline for a proposed community report back. So they were quick to respond to any suggestions and adjust their processes. Needless to say, it's safe to say they got a positive report back onto what the findings they'd found. The other one I'd point out, which is a great quote, at the draft strategy workshop, where a number of the stakeholders were in a room with coffee as we went through the draft and what was proposed in the strategy. One participant observed to me, "You open your mouth and 4 council staff start taking notes." HBC considers the engagement process as followed by the Heritage Team, where open, practical, flexible and very early stakeholder involvement occurs will lead to a solution that is more acceptable and effective. HBC considers this should be the council template and should be the norm. Thank you very much for listening to this deputation.
Thank you. Well, I have to say that it is incredibly gratifying to hear a submission like that. I was one of the ones that attended one of the sessions, and I think the staff were sort of probably slightly horrified that I'd turned up. But it was such an amazing process, and I just I found it incredibly enjoyable. And as I listened to each of the report backs from each of the tables, you know, you could sort of feel the sort of blending of views that had come together in such a wonderful way. So I do hope that it's a template, and I'm glad that all councillors have got to hear that, because it's an ideal process for engaging people who are already engaged in an issue, and then occasionally attracting in others who sort of come along for the ride and get swept up in it. So I felt exactly the same way, so I'm absolutely thrilled to hear that. But I don't know, does anyone have any questions for Mark as a formal deputation?
Well done.
Oh, well, thank you very much, and congratulations to staff too, because that took a lot of courage, I think, to go out in a new way and engage the community, so thank you very much. So, and the next is the Inner City West Neighbourhood Association and Restore Christchurch Cathedral, and I think they're coming together. Neil Roberts representing the Inner City West Neighbourhood Association, David Collins representing Restore Christchurch Cathedral on item 29, Citizens War Memorial Request for Relocation, and there's a paper coming round the table. Welcome.
Thank you, councillors, for receiving this deputation. I'm here on behalf of ICON, the Inner City West Neighbourhood Association. Item 29 on your agenda, of course, is the, as has been stated, is the removal of the Citizens War Memorial and relocation somewhere else in the city. ICON is very much opposed to this, this suggestion. We believe that it compromises not only the values of the memorial, but it will likely have the potential to compromise other sites in the city where the memorial may be located. We don't know where that is yet, but that's potentially could be the case. We also believe that there are certain acts of good faith that needs to be observed in terms of this memorial. And the first that I would indicate is the good faith with the originator of this memorial, Mr. George Gould. It wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Gould. He campaigned through the 1920s vigorously to have this memorial built against considerable opposition from the RSA. And as late as 1934, the RSA were trying to scuttle the project and have all the money, which was £10,000 at that time, turned over for welfare purposes. They said, we don't need another memorial in the city. We've got the Bridge of Remembrance, that's all that is necessary. Fortunately, he prevailed, and the one thing that's very important with George Gould and the memorial is that he insisted that that memorial needed to be in the heart of the city, nowhere else. And the heart of the city is Cathedral Square. That's where he intended it to go, and that's where it should remain. To move it out of there is to lose faith with that original intent. Now, you can say, well, Gould's been dead since 1941, doesn't matter. The next faith that should be good faith that should be observed is with the designers. most people don't realise that that is a site-specific memorial. It's designed to be in an inner city location. It's designed to be in a closed environment, not an open environment. It would look totally different if it was meant to be in an open environment. So therefore, it belongs in a situation where there are buildings round it, not an open space. If you put it in an open space, it would look totally different. And you need to recognise what Trethewey and his collaborator, the architect George Hart, intended when they designed that. To not observe that is to deny their purpose with this memorial. It's not a piece of furniture that you can remove and move from room to room around the city. It's not like that. And the third act of good faith that should be observed is in relation to the ICAMUS Charter, which the Christchurch City Council is a signatory to and is adopted. And the Charter states that the site of a structure is an integral part of its cultural heritage value. You can move it, but under 1, the site is not of associated value. 2, relocation is only means of saving the structure. Well, neither of those apply in this particular instance. So I think that if the City Council is to observe the very charter that it has aligned itself with, then serious consideration should be given to the removal of this memorial. It stood there for over 81 years now, and it should remain there for another 81 years so other generations can get the benefit of it. So ICOM requests that, that the memorial stays where it is.
Did you want to speak as well?
Sorry?
Sorry, did you want to speak as well?
Yes.
Yes,
if I may.
please.
Morena, I've had a statement, I think it's been filed electronically, and I'm David Collins, a committee member of the Restore Christchurch Cathedral Group. The first 2 paragraphs are explaining the background to the group, which I think you're familiar with, and I'll just read the rest of it, won't take a moment. The cenotaph, a memorial to the tragedies of war, was purposefully erected beside the cathedral. Its design, reflecting Christian symbolism, was stipulated by Anglican Church leadership at that time as a condition of it being located on cathedral land. The cenotaph also has a special place in the history and spiritual memory of our city, which became inextricably linked to the cathedral and Christian values and to Anzac Day services for the purposes of remembrance of the human sacrifice of war. The cenotaph belongs to our city, to the people, and its legal ownership is with our City Council. It does not belong to the RSA. The cenotaph was a privately funded citizens project, a project which the RSA did not contribute to financially and actually opposed for some time. Once completed in 1937, the cenotaph became the setting for the city's Anzac Day memorial services led by the RSA and typically concluded by a service in the cathedral. Thus, the histories of the cenotaph and the cathedral have been inextricably linked since the mid-1930s. Our strong belief is that the cenotaph should remain in its current position beside the cathedral. Both cathedral and cenotaph would be diminished if separated. They belong together as places of memory for all people in our city's central cathedral square, a setting which, with the recovery of the cathedral and the square, will again see busy throngs of citizens and visitors. The cathedral precinct will become the foremost place to visit and gather in our city, an entirely different scenario from the comparatively isolated Cranmer Square, which I wasn't supposed to mention possible alternatives. We believe the current issue around the cenotaph is a direct consequence of decisions of the former bishop and the church property trust she chaired. Their plans for a new cathedral with annex buildings required the cenotaph to be removed. The RSA were given notice of this intent In addition, access to the cenotaph was blocked by fences on the pretext that it was unsafe. There is no basis for arguing the cenotaph must be shifted to enable restoration. It can be protected in situ and worked around. The tram tracks and roadway are much closer to the cathedral than the cenotaph. We believe the vision of recovering the cathedral to its former glory by association requires the cenotaph to be likewise honoured and retained beside the cathedral. There have been too many losses and too much change as a consequence of the quakes. Now is the time to value and protect what remains of our city's special places. It's time to recover our city's special places of memory and protect them into the future. Thank you.
Okay, questions? Pauline?
No, you answered my question in your presentation, so thank you.
Any other questions? Phil?
Thank you for your deputation. Your comment is that it should stay exactly where it is and building work around it be protected. But I guess the other concern is that if it stays exactly where it is, that in fact with the best protection it could still be damaged. I just wonder if you might make a comment about that risk.
Yes, I understand it's able to be protected. You do it very substantially. I've often written conditions and resource consents that require things to be protected. I have one instance I can recall, the Archer Cottage in Queenstown got damaged, but generally they are respected. And in this case, it's a substantial structure, and you'd have a substantial structure around it to protect it. I'm totally confident it can be protected.
Dion?
Just on the off chance that the church property trusts require the council to remove the Citizens Memorial, what would you believe, or from both of you, what would you believe would be the best alternative location in that situation?
Which location?
Yeah.
We really haven't...
They're not allowed to comment on location? No.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, that would be the subject of a consultation if we decide to move it. Yeah. Who owns the War Memorial?
Well, we understand you do.
Council.
Well, we have a resolution that says that the city engineer be appointed custodian to the Citizens' War Memorial in Cathedral Square, and that the memorial be maintained to an adequate standard with reimbursement of funds from the trust fund if necessary. Trust fund, which I understand is exhausted. Do we really own it? I mean, the land is owned by the church property trustees, and we'd be required to move it if they asked us to.
Well, I'm not certain. We could certainly check on that.
Yeah.
I think the other issue...
I mean, it's in the paperwork attachment. I mean, I found this all very interesting. I assumed that there would be a, you know, that somewhere I would find a specific document, legal document, that said that we were the owner of the memorial. But it does appear that we've become the custodian on the what was the there was a group that was the citizens group, you know, that had been originally established. They were the ones that maintained the maintained it. Sorry, they had an agreement. The agreement's sitting here. It's dated back in 19 something or other, with the actual with the church property trustees. The trust deed. Sorry. It just seems to me that this may be the core of the issue. The church property trustees, the Christchurch War Memorial Association Incorporated. So there was a...
Brent Smith's there that can possibly
Trust.
clarify.
Oh,
He
well,
should
Brent.
have a microphone.
I might be able to help there, but how does
Oh, maybe I'll leave it. I just thought that you may have done some consideration of the ownership issue. All right.
No,
So thank you very much for your deputation.
Thank you.
And the next submission is the Christchurch Civic Trust and Historic Places Trust. Ross Gray representing both. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Dalzell, and good morning, and good morning to City Councillors. I'm appearing here with this deputation to represent the very strongly held view of the Christchurch Civic Trust and Historic Places Canterbury, of which I am the Deputy Chair of both. And we strongly oppose the removal of the Citizens' War Memorial from Cathedral Square. So I'm going to read from my paper, which I believe you have on your screens. If not, there's some paper copies around. The Citizens' War Memorial Monument is a vital and integral component of the city's most important public space, I think as we all accept, Cathedral Square, and it is essential that it remains so in the post-disaster years. Its structural and visual form creates a carefully orchestrated synergy with the structure, form and symbolism of Christchurch Cathedral. It needs the cathedral and the cathedral needs it because of a shared meaning embodied in the crucifix form of both structures. And if you think of the floor plan of the cathedral, obviously it's a cross, a Latin cross, transept and so on. And the memorial itself is a cross, obviously vertically in elevation and in physical form in stone and so on. 15 metres high, in fact. This is no accident or coincidence. The Anglican Church gave explicit instructions on these design matters in sculptor William Trethewey and architect George Hart of the Millers Building fame, in case you don't know, fully and faithfully executed them. In doing so, they created what eminent New Zealand historian Jock Phillips says is possibly the finest public monument in the country. To separate the two structures would be to considerably diminish both heritage structures. Restated, for more than half its life, Christchurch Cathedral has been the core of a shared civic experience of great profundity with its nearest neighbour, the Citizens' War Memorial. The Civic Trust and Historic Places Canterbury cannot see any valid reason whatsoever to sever this physical and deeply symbolic bond. The Christchurch City Council, through its ratepayers, has recently agreed to contribute a generous $10 million to the reinstatement of Christchurch Cathedral, although I note there's still some opposition to that, with some stated restrictions, which most people aren't aware of, but you people will know. This follows a long history of the council making a significant contribution to the cathedral, including re-roofing and earthquake strengthening, without which, of course, the cathedral could well have collapsed entirely in the quakes. Furthermore, the current concept plan by Regenerate Christchurch for the future of Cathedral Square shows the Citizens' War Memorial in its present position. Planners have clearly not considered its presence a problem. Rather, I think they see it as part of the mix of features contributing towards a vibrant civic centre. And you will, it's very small for you to see, but you will recall the Regenerate document for the square, and there we see very nicely surrounded by paving and trees and so on, the Citizens' War Memorial, and you can get some sense of the real distance it is from the building site that the reinstatement will make of the cathedral. The objection that, by many, I guess, that the cathedral is some years away from reoccupation may be true. But in the interim, the south-facing areas of the wonderful new city library surely offer quiet spaces with views out to the War Memorial. In light of these factors, it would be highly counterproductive for the council to accede to the RSA's request to move the memorial away from Cathedral Square to another city location. It would be endangering, in fact, we maintain, the integrity of the cathedral itself, which you're giving $10 million of ratepayers' money towards, thankfully, and it would also impact on the half share of the 9.75 or whatever it was contribution you're making to the regeneration of the square as a base starting point figure. The RSA submission takes little account of the War Memorial's function to be a reminder and a memorial of war and sacrifice for everyone, certainly not just for the comrades, family members or descendants of association members. For instance, thousands of German and Japanese tourists come to Christchurch annually. Those tourists, descendants no doubt of some who will have fought against New Zealanders, are most unlikely to make a special trip to another open space, I won't mention any names, to visit the Citizens' War Memorial relocated there. In fact, because Christchurch Cathedral is so close to the War Memorial, visitors to it are provided with a ready-made, handy, magnificent enclosed space whose prime purpose, well, its secondary purpose, if you like, apart from worship, is to give people of any and all persuasions a place in which to reflect. The Citizens' War Memorial, when viewed from east of the square, and this was mentioned by Neil, represents a relatively plain rear facade, as you'll be aware. This is not a significant problem given the extent of the surrounding built environment, but if it were to be shifted to another open city space, or to an open city space, this would present a serious visual difficulty, given the possibly long vistas from any direction. And as Neil mentioned, the memorial is absolutely a site-specific monument. Nothing other than, if it weren't for the church, for the Anglican Cathedral and its requirements, that cenotaph could well look something and be something completely different. So it's absolutely a part of the of that space, if you like. The Christchurch and as such is totally unsuitable for shifting away from its designated site. The Christchurch Civic Trust has a particular concern for urban planning matters and is alarmed at the ramifications for inner city living, neighbourhood living, that any shift would raise such matters as siting, orientation, impact on living values and the like. It appears to have been all too easy for the RSA, and I mean that in not an unkindly manner, to claim some sort of ownership for the Citizens' War Memorial. It commemorates the ultimate sacrifice made by men and women from Canterbury, but those who remember are in fact all people from Greater Christchurch, Canterbury, New Zealand, in fact the globe. The memorial is owned by the citizens of Christchurch and is administered and cared for by the funds from those ratepayers. The RSA's line of thinking that the War Memorial must be shifted at its request may well be born of years of post-earthquakes frustration. One can understand that. But it carries, we think, an ill-founded and somewhat proprietorial, i.e. ownership, attitude, and it fails to take into account all relevant heritage and urban planning factors. Professor Chris Kisling, who is the chair of the Civic Trust, couldn't be here today, so I would like to conclude with a brief comment from him. Quote, "The submission certainly represents my personal view regarding the War Memorial staying where it is. I do not believe the restoration work on the cathedral requires the shift of the War Memorial, and I have not seen any cogent arguments for such an undertaking. The Citizens' War Memorial is not a chess piece to be moved from square to square at the whim of current players who have decision-making power." Finally, the Christchurch Civic Trust and Historic Places Canterbury, thank you for this opportunity. We both urge you as Mayor and Councillors to reject the request by the RSA for the removal of the Citizens' War Memorial from the heart of the city, Cathedral Square. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Phil?
Thank you, Ross. One of the other concerns that the Church Property Trust have told us about is that, in fact, if it remains there, that due to space constraints, that the costs of restoration could rise. Does that not concern you?
Well, in this city we know that anything could happen, but things don't have to happen. And there was certainly nothing in the, as I recall it, in the Cathedral Working Group report, the one that sealed the deal that it was going to be reinstated, as to the detrimental effects on the budget, with any consideration of the reinstatement in relation to the war memorial. So I certainly wouldn't take that at face value, Councillor, and I think that would need very much more substantial backing by the CPT.
Phil?
Just briefly, thank you. Look, thanks, Ross. But I guess you've used the phrase anything that can happen could happen. It just, are you not concerned that in fact, you know, there is clearly a risk if it even with the best protection, and that in fact if it was broken with heavy machinery or whatever, then in fact it would be gone forever?
Oh well, I don't think that would necessarily follow, Councillor. I think if it were damaged, things get repaired. We've had a big earthquake, things get repaired. But I certainly support David Collins' view that sufficient protection could be provided in this amazingly high-tech city of ours. It seems incomprehensible that it couldn't be protected sufficiently for it to maintain its place while the work goes on.
Does the Trust acknowledge that if we were required by the CPT to move it, we would be required to do so and would have to?
Well, we haven't covered that point, Leanne, but obviously that's something that would need to be considered. But my point in drawing attention to what the City Council, you people and we, have contributed to the Anglican Cathedral over the years in terms of, you know, support for earthquake strengthening and so on, and the current $10 million that you're giving to the cathedral's reinstatement, and the contribution you're putting into the redevelopment of Cathedral Square, I don't think that the Church Properties Trustees should or would ignore that fact and demand that the memorial be removed.
Well, you've read their letter, and they do indicate some concerns around the cost. But anyway, we'll discuss that when we get to the paper. Thank you very much for your submission. Thank you. The next item that we're going to receive deputations on is item 31, proposed process to provide policy support to the residential unit overlay. And could I invite Warwick Schaefer from the Christchurch Coastal Residents United? Morning, Warwick.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to come back. I understand this is not standard once you've spoken on a topic before, so thank you to the Mayor's Office for that. I understand that you probably all understand what this is about now, but just briefly, it's about putting a clause that didn't get into the plan related to the residential unit overlay, which covers areas of South Shore, New Brighton and Redcliffs. The first point I've got on my speaking notes, and I think you've received them all electronically, really it's just, I feel this is a great chance and something that we need to collaborate on. The Coastal Hazards chapter has been a rather torrid time for everyone involved, I think, and particularly residents who now are sitting on sections that they can't build on and considering taking up residence in tents and caravans. I would love this to be a thing where the council, the community, the government, Regenerate, actually really get together on, work on and fix. It's a great chance to fix something, and we can get some runs on the board with that, and on the basis of that, hopefully we can do some bigger things after that. I think that's probably my biggest message about this. I responded specifically to some points in the document, and I'll go through those now. The next point I've got down is KISS, which is standing for Keep It Simple, Stupid. We have a policy and we should use it. So
I always say keep it short and simple. It's a much nicer way of the KISS expression.
Right, well, thank you. Yeah, I'm trained as a forester and I learned that in the bush. So. The first point, point one, in the recommendations of the report, agrees to use Section 71 process of the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act 2016 to provide a policy framework that supports the residential unit overlay within the high flood management, hazard management area. So my sort of response to this is, why is a policy framework required? We simply need to put the missing clause back in. Well, I shouldn't say back in is actually more correct. So Judge Hanson states in his letter that they would have fixed it as a minor correction had they been alerted. So, you know, we could, it shouldn't be so difficult. Keep it simple. We need to get a win on this. We can do bigger things after, going back to my first point. This point 3 of the, point 3 in the document, actually, before I go on, there was one other point I wanted to make. I actually quite like what's coming through in the document in some ways. It's quite creative thinking I can see in there, and some inventive solutions to big problems. And I like that. I'm just saying this is not the time. When we come to do bigger things, we can amalgamate some of those ideas, I think. Point 3, note that staff will investigate options and mechanisms to engage the relevant members of the independent hearings panel on the Christchurch replacement district plan so that they may be able to provide advice on policy development required for the proposal. Actually, initially I thought, why do we need to do that? They've got the policy, we've got the letter, but actually, sort of on reflection, it might not be a bad thing. It could be helpful to provide, provided the existing clause is the base. What I'm trying to say is that we need to avoid relitigating this completely at this stage. It could lead us to quite a bad place. This clause was arrived at following a rigorous independent panel process. So going back to the judges to get more clarification is, I think, potentially quite beneficial. I've added a kind of proviso in here that CCRU and affected community boards should also be privy to these discussions. We don't want a black box being created here, which so often happens where you bring an issue and council and various stakeholders go away and try and sort it out. And they're probably doing that best, but from the outside it's a black box. You have no idea what's actually going on in there. We're saying view community as important stakeholders in this. So yeah, point 3 I think is actually quite a good one. Point 5, note that staff are required to continue to process any resource consent applications in accordance with current decisions, policy and rules of the district plan until such time as any new decisions are operative. Now, the response to that is this should be removed. It is not relevant to getting the missing clause put back in and risk codifying what is currently happening. The Hanson letter suggests current practice is wrong. I've got it here, paragraph 8, and if there's time I can read it if you like, as does the Redcliffe's hearing outcome. Not a recommendation, 6.717, it's kind of long. I think I'll just summarise it in that this, the Avon River, no, the Otakarito Avon River Corridor Regeneration Plan is essentially saying this, what we do here shouldn't conflict with that. And what I'm saying back to that is, while tempting to make it better, the clause would be in the plan as is now, had things gone according to plan. So what I'm saying here is this needs to be the primary thought when fixing this. It would have been like this now. We should not get too bogged down in wider considerations. Wider issues can be dealt with in the next step, and there's certainly going to be next steps. And as I said before, that document actually contains some interesting ideas that I think with some time we can develop to handle next steps, because the next steps are bigger and harder. My second point, so that really is about keeping it simple, cutting it down, getting in there with an editor, so that we can do something that is really achievable and we can do it quickly and we can all high-five at the end of it and feel good about it. We think the council should instruct Regenerate to draft a proposal to the Minister. rather than it being done by council as is a proposal currently. So point 2, direct staff to prepare a proposal to amend the district plan and engage with strategic partners and Regenerate Christchurch as required under the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act 2016. This should be direct Regenerate to prepare a proposal for the Minister to put the missing clause into the plan and engage strategic partners. I put in brackets here, including CCRU and affected community boards. Again, I think it's very important that the community is viewed as a strategic party, an interested party in this, and brings a lot to the table, I think, as well. Why Regenerate? Regenerate sits naturally in the middle of all interested parties and have experience doing this through Redcliffe School. Point 4, instruct staff to report to the council by December 2018 with the draft Section 71 proposal for the Minister of Greater Christchurch. This should be instruct Regenerate to report back with a draft Section 71 proposal in 2 weeks. December 2018 means March 2019. It's really, in my opinion, far too long for something that should be much simpler. Again, it's making it simple so we can do it faster and taking on bigger things after that. The final point I have on my submission is just some communication things that I consider to be misleading and perhaps really a little defensive. What we're really looking for is just to put the cards on the table. We just want to fix it. We don't need to be defensive. We want honest brokers here. So the point about 31 consents. Now, when that's written like that, you think the subtext is sort of everything's all right. But it's not the whole story. Those 31 consents are almost all relying on existing use rights. You can use those throughout the high flood management area. The residential unit overlay has really been treated like it is just the high, it's like it doesn't exist. So to say 31 consents and have the subtext that there's not a problem, I think is misleading and a little unhelpful. There's certainly problems. We've got a long list of people that can't build, and we do need to fix that, and we should acknowledge that. Point 4.5, there, as a result of this uncertainty, there is a perception residents cannot build in affected areas. I know these are little words and that, but it's more than a perception. There's a long list of people that are having issues, and again, we need to acknowledge that we shouldn't be putting things like this in documents saying there's a perception. My last point, and I see
Warwick, I'm sorry, you've come to the end of your time, and it's such a shame because you've raised issues that individual councillors want to ask about, but I did want to. Unfortunately, your submission's predicated on an understanding of how Section 71 works, which isn't how it works in practice. So, we really do want to find a solution to this. So, yeah, it is a shame that you haven't allowed time for questioning, but we're going to have to say thank you very much there, and I'm sure we're going to get to a good place, but I think that there does need to be a clear understanding of how Section 71 works. I mean, you heard me stand up at the public meeting in New Brighton and explain that it's a lengthy process, and it is. That's why I would have preferred to reinstate the independent hearings panel, but we can't, and you can see that the advice is there for that reason. But we think we can speed it up as much as we can, but it's going to require every single one to collaborate, but we need to control the process around this table, so it's a council law decision. And I think that's something that hasn't been taken into account.
Yes, well, thank you for time, and certainly we don't profess to know it all.
No, not at all. But we really appreciate you coming in, and I know that you had to do that at short notice because you thought that you weren't coming in. So thank you very much. Okay, so now could we have Tim Sinters, Sally Buck and Daryl Latham. morning. Who's going to kick off? Sally?
Yeah, I'll kick off. Well, here's a deputation from all of the Coastal Burwood Board and all except one of the Linwood Central Heathcote Community Board, and we're speaking for ourselves, but we have the support of the following people: Tim Sintes, David East, Kim Money, Tim Baker, Linda Stewart, Glenn Livingston, Dion Swiggs, Yanni Johansson, Daryl Latham, Alexander Davids, Tim Lindley, Jake McClellan, Brenda Lowe Johnson and myself, Sally Buck. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate the Council on acting on the concerns of the residents, getting a report to this meeting, but we'd really like you to hasten the process so that we don't have to wait for December to get a report back. We believe this is a simple fix and there's no reason for any delay. Judge Hanson has stated in a letter that my understanding is that while the RDA rule is included in the plan, the policy was at some stage omitted from the planning provisions. Recently, I spoke to one of the independent hearing panel members, and they told me that the panel's decision was very clear. They wanted to give relief to the owners of residentially zoned land and make it easy for them to apply to build new residential dwellings subject to meeting the requirements of the relevant RDA, and this was to be done on a non-notified activity basis. Judge Hanson has also stated that the independent hearings panel made a number of minor corrections to the plan. He said if this matter had been brought to our attention, we would certainly have added the policy back into the plan as a minor correction. I'll leave it to Daryl and Tim to take this further.
Thank you, thank you, Sally. First of all, good morning, everybody. Some observations from what Warwick has said. The basic issue with the report is that it is clouding and complicating what should be a simple fix. Sir John Hanson, supported by Judge Hassan, said in his letter that it could have been added as a minor correction if they had been notified. The report is full of things like policy development, talk of reconvening the panel, testing it again to see if it is fit for purpose, etc. All of this is inappropriate. This clause policy is the product of rigorous testing in front of an independent panel. What has been developed and intended by that panel needs to be put in. We need to keep it simple and get some runs on the board to start to build confidence again. We're requesting that the current recommendations in item 31 be amended. There are principles of natural justice and fairness at stake here. There have been various acknowledgements at recent public meetings and through the media where it would not be unreasonable for the public to have reached a view that the existence of an error has been acknowledged and that this would be fixed as a matter of priority. Therefore, we contend that the delay until December for a report back from the public's point of view is unacceptable. This can be done in a matter of weeks, not months. I submit to you that the Council must therefore take every practicable action to reduce or eliminate the risk of problems escalating further. If the current recommendations are adopted, I believe this could potentially give rise to a degree of public uncertainty with potential repercussions for the Council. The Council and councillors have the opportunity to not only do things right, but also to do the right thing on behalf of affected residents. That is, treat this with the urgency that it deserves. This situation needs to be resolved by Council as soon as possible, and I would suggest not by a report back from staff by Christmas, but rather treated with urgency and resolved as an early Christmas present for the affected residents. I do believe that if you don't do it, the government will do it for you. Thank you.
Right, I'm just going to summarise on that. I'm just confused how we got to this stage. It actually blows me away to think that this has been brought up for so long and it's taken all this work to get to this stage. I don't believe it's been a team effort. We've actually, I think we could have sorted this out so long ago. As we all know, we've brought it up at the community board and at the council so many times, and to see it get to this stage is actually it's kind of heartbreaking for everybody. It's put people in difficult positions. As community board members, we have to listen to the community, and we hear their stress, we feel their stress, and it's not fair on a community board member or anybody to go through this. We're all supposed to be a team. We're supposed to work together and get these things sorted out, and we haven't done it, and I'm actually quite annoyed about it. I just think it's the stress that we've put people under is actually shocking. I've been really concerned, as all of us have been, because we've seen the stress in our community. We've brought it up and nothing's been done about it till now, and it took drastic action to get to the stage. All I can say is please get it fixed for the community, for all of us, and let's work as a team on going onwards. Thank you.
Right, so we've got a bit of time for questions, but I just want to kind of start with the Section 71 process, because, you know, as you all heard me stand up and say at the meeting, the Section 71 process is a statutory process, and it's a very lengthy process. Individual strategic partners are given 30 days to provide a response. The minister herself can take time before she publishes, and then she has to receive submissions. I mean, that's not a time frame that's specified in the Act. And once the wording is submitted to the minister, she can only say yes or no. And the key to the decision making that she will make is the advice that she receives from the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. So I think that we need to work collaboratively, which means that we need to ask you to bring your communities along with this process and help them understand this process, because it isn't a straightforward process. So the one protection that we want to offer, and it's a degree of comfort to the entire process, so that every single strategic partner can sign off in 5 working days instead of 30 working days. We want to tell them what members of the independent hearings panel say about the specific clause, because there is nowhere in Decision 53 that we can point to them saying what they thought of the wording that was provided to them for consideration. So if we simply give the wording to the at least 2 of the members of the panel that actually heard it. I mean, you've quoted Sir John Hanson. He didn't sit on this part of the decision. He was the overall chair of the Independent Hearings Panel, but he didn't sit on this decision. So the idea is to bring the Independent Hearings Panel to provide written support, or the members of it, to provide written advice to support the insertion of the words, so that we've got a clear policy statement that supports the residential unit overlay. So we are crystal clear that the decision then comes back to council, and then it goes to strategic partners, and then it goes to the minister. We've, out of the resolution, we'll take the December date out. We'll ask for an early report back to the council so that we can get it out to the strategic partners and to Regenerate Christchurch and to the minister, so that advice chain is supported by those that actually heard the submissions and are able to say that the instatement of those words, the inclusion of the policy statement will support the residential unit overlay. But if it doesn't, if it goes from our hands at this point, then it won't be the councillors around this table that will be able to make that decision. So we need you to work with us in order to get the solution that we all want to get to. This is the first time a resolution has come to council for us to consider. This is the first time. We had a notice of motion, and this report is as a result of the notice of motion, and there hasn't been a resolution in front of the council on this matter at all before now. So I'm sort of saying that we need to, I agree with you, we need to work together, but it requires us to both to understand the process and communicate that very clearly to the community, because we're actually all on the same side.
Actually,
we all want the same thing.
If I might interrupt there, I think you did right, but I think we should have sorted this out earlier, and I think when there's warning bells
There was
flashing...
no resolution brought to council before,
Well,
so
I think...
it's not fair on councillors around the table to say that it's been brought to council. I have, no, and I've said this, I'm not going to say it now because I've said it over and over again. No, I didn't understand what the problem was.
But you knew there was a problem, and that's what
Yes, I know, and I've been investigating it for months, well, weeks and weeks and weeks. So, you know, and ever since it was brought to my attention, which is actually July, and as I said before, you know, it was actually Daryl's article that finally started me in the right direction, but I still couldn't get to the bottom of it until I read Sir John's letter. But that doesn't matter, it's how we go forward from here. This is the first time the council as a whole is considering the solution, which is to use Section 71 of the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act, and all we're asking you to do is to make sure that you help the community understand that the process is not straightforward, it's not simple, and we cannot control the time frames.
Okay,
all we can do is ask the community to understand that we will do everything we can to make it as fast-tracked as we can.
Can I just briefly comment on that and say thank you for the clarity that you have put around the issue and what you have articulated. We will bring the community on board. We will listen to our community, and we will work together with council on this issue as long as going forward we have that transparency and sense of immediacy to resolve this issue ASAP.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's brilliant. Thank you. Right.